There's a certain kind of quiet that only exists when a 2-year-old is completely absorbed. It's not silence, not really. It's the gentle scrape of a wooden block against another, the soft humming sound my son Leo makes deep in his throat when he's concentrating the occasional grunt of toddler effort. For me, at 32 years old, that quiet is the most peaceful sound in the world. We were on the floor of my living room, bathed in the afternoon sun slanting through the big window. Leo, my little guy, was building a tower. It was wobbly, a chaotic stack of primary colors, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. He placed a final red block on top, then looked up at me, his eyes wide with pride. "Dada look big." I smiled my heart doing that little flip-flop thing it does 100 times a day. "That's amazing, buddy. It's the biggest tower ever." He giggled and, with the joyous destruction only a toddler can muster, swiped his hand through the middle of it. Blocks scattered across the rug. We both laughed. This was my life now, and it was perfect. It was a life I had carefully, deliberately built, brick by brick, just like Leo's tower. A life of patience, of gentle guidance, of letting a little boy be a little boy. A life that was the polar opposite of the one I'd had growing up. And then I heard the key in the lock. The sound was a tiny metallic click, but it landed in the peaceful quiet of the room like a stone. Leo didn't notice, of course. He was already gathering blocks for a new creation. But I noticed. My shoulders tensed up just a fraction. The air, which had been light and warm, suddenly felt a little heavier, a little thicker. The door swung open and my mother, Maria Lopez, stood there. At 56, she was still a formidable presence, her hair perfectly in place, her posture ramrod straight. She carried with her the scent of her specific hairspray and a faint floral perfume, a combination that could instantly transport me back 20 years to a time when I was not a father, but a subject. "Jack," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of arrival. "Hi, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. "Didn't know you were stopping by. I was in the neighborhood. Just thought I'd see my grandson." Her eyes scanned the room, not with the warmth of a doting grandmother, but with the critical gaze of an inspector. They swept over the scattered blocks, the small pillow fort in the corner, and finally landed on Leo. Her expression softened, but only slightly. "Leonardo, come give Grandma a hug." Leo, bless his innocent heart, scrambled to his feet and ran to her, wrapping his little arms around her legs. She patted his head, a gesture that was somehow both affectionate and dismissive at the same time. "What have you two been doing?" she asked, her eyes back on me. "Making a mess, I see." "We're building," I said, keeping my voice level. "It's good for his motor skills." She made a non-committal humming sound as she walked further into the room, her handbag clicking as she set it on the dining table. "He looks a little thin, Jack. Are you feeding him enough?" And so it began. The gentle, persistent, unending drip of criticism, the unsolicited advice, the constant references to what she called the Maria Lopez parenting doctrine. It was a doctrine I knew all too well. I was its first and only test subject, a graduate of its 18-year curriculum of rigid rules, high expectations, and emotional distance. I hadn't just been raised by it. I had survived it. He just had a snack, Mom, an apple and some cheese. She opened the pantry the way she always did, as if conducting a surprise inspection of my supplies. An apple. Good. But where are the cookies? Vanilla wafers. A boy needs treats. When you were his age, you loved those little frosted animal crackers. That was our special treat after you finished your flashcards. Structure and reward. It's all part of the doctrine. He has treats, Mom. We just don't do a lot of processed sugar. I started gathering the blocks, my movements a little more jerky than before. It's a different time. A different time, she repeated, her voice laced with a skepticism that bordered on pity. You knew parents and your ideas. All these gentle feelings and organic snacks. You're not raising a boy, you're raising an orchid. You have to build resilience. You have to prepare them for the world. The world isn't gentle, Jack. I just nodded, focusing on stacking the blocks. I'll keep that in mind. It was my standard reply, a verbal shield I'd perfected over the years. It meant everything and nothing. It meant, I hear you and I am choosing to ignore you to keep the peace. The next front in our quiet, undeclared war opened up about 10 minutes later. Leo had abandoned his blocks and was now attempting to scale the back of the sofa. It was a low, soft couch, and he was being careful. I was right there, my hands hovering a few inches from his back, spotting him, letting him test his own limits in a safe environment. Good job, buddy, I encouraged him softly. Use your strong legs. Jack. My mother's voice was sharp, cutting through the air. What are you doing? Get him down from there. He's going to fall and crack his head open. He's fine, Mom. I'm right here. He needs to learn to climb. It's part of his development. She rushed over her face, a mask of anxiety and disapproval. Development. It's dangerous. You are entirely too permissive with him. In my day, children were taught that furniture is for sitting, not for climbing. A firm no is what he needs. A clear boundary. That's the foundation of the doctrine. Without boundaries, you have chaos. I could feel the old anger, the familiar frustration of my teenage years bubbling up in my chest. I remembered all the times I'd been told no for things that seemed perfectly harmless. No climbing trees, no riding my bike past the end of the block. No, no, no. Her world was built on a foundation of fear, and she had tried to build mine on it too. I took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about Leo. I'm watching him, I said, my voice firm but quiet. He is not in danger. Leo, sensing the tension, stopped climbing and looked from my face to his grandmother's. He had a little frown on his brow. I hated that. I hated that her presence was already teaching him to associate exploration with conflict. I lifted him off the couch and set him on the floor. Okay, buddy, how about we read a book instead? My mother took this as a victory. See, a little bit of discipline. It's not so hard. I didn't argue. I just pulled Leo onto my lap and grabbed one of his favorite books, the one about the little blue truck. As I read, I could feel her eyes on me. I knew what she was thinking. She was thinking I was soft, weak, that I was failing to prepare my son for a harsh world. She didn't understand that I wasn't preparing him for her world. I was preparing him for his. The final skirmish of the afternoon came, as it often did, over screen time. I was in the kitchen starting to prep for dinner. I had put on a quiet, slow-paced educational cartoon for Leo. It was my sacred 15 minutes of peace, the time I used to chop vegetables without worrying about little fingers getting under the knife. The volume was low, the colors were muted, and Leo was sitting on his little beanbag chair, watching calmly. My mother walked in and stood with her arms crossed, staring at the television as if it were spewing poison into the room. Really, Jack? I didn't even turn around. I just kept chopping the carrots. What is it, Mom? The electronic babysitter. I knew it. When you were little, I never once sat you in front of a screen so I could get something done. I engaged with you. We counted blocks. We did alphabet charts. We were productive. A child's mind is a garden, Jack. You are letting weeds grow in it. The rhythmic thump, thump, thump of my knife on the cutting board was the only thing keeping my temper in check. I thought about her when she was a young mother. She was only 24 when she had me. A kid, really. But she never acted like one. She acted like a general commanding a one-man army. I wondered if she was ever tired, if she ever just wanted 15 minutes of peace. I finally turned to face her, wiping my hands on a towel. Mom, it's 15 minutes. It's an educational program about animals. It's not rotting his brain. It's giving me a chance to make him a healthy dinner without either of us getting hurt. It's called balance. It's called lazy. She shot back, her voice low but intense. The Maria Lopez Doctrine does not have a chapter on balance. It has a chapter on diligence, on consistency, on unwavering commitment. You are taking the easy way out, and it will show in his character later. Mark my words. I just stared at her. There was no winning. There was no debate. Her doctrine was a religion, and she was its sole prophet. Any deviation from it was not just a difference of opinion, it was heresy. It was a personal failing on my part. I wanted to scream. I wanted to list all the ways her doctrine had failed me, the anxiety it had instilled, the difficulty I'd had learning to trust my own judgment, the years it took me to realize that the world wasn't the terrifying, hostile place she'd always painted it to be. I wanted to tell her that her methods hadn't made me strong, they had made me brittle, that I hadn't thrived because of her parenting, but in spite of it. But I didn't. I just took a breath. I looked past her to my son, who was pointing at the screen and saying, "Moo, cow." He was happy. He was safe. He was loved. That was all that mattered. "Dinner will be ready in about an hour if you want to stay," I said. My voice devoid of emotion. It was a dismissal, not an invitation, and we both knew it. She picked up her handbag from the table. "No, I can see I'm just in the way here." She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. "I'm only trying to help Jack. I love that boy. I just don't want to see you make mistakes." "I know, Mom," I said. And the sad part was I did. I knew she loved him. I knew in her own twisted, fear-driven way she thought she was protecting him. She was trying to hand down her armor, this heavy, suffocating parenting doctrine, because it was the only thing that had gotten her through her own life. She left, and the click of the door closing behind her was like a pressure valve being released. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes, listening. The cartoon ended. The television went quiet. And in its place, I could hear the soft, peaceful sound of my son humming to himself on the living room rug. I had survived the visit. We had survived. I had deflected and absorbed and kept the peace. But I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that a day was coming when deflecting wouldn't be enough. A day was coming when I would have to stand and fight, not for me, but for him, for his right to have a childhood, not a training camp. A day was coming when the Maria Lopez parenting doctrine would meet its end. I just didn't know it would be so soon. That day came less than a week later. It was a Saturday, the kind of crisp, brilliant autumn day that feels like a gift. Leo, my 2-year-old son, was in a fantastic mood. We'd spent the morning at the park, and now we were on our big weekend adventure, the grocery store. My mother, Maria, had insisted on joining us. She claimed she needed a few things, but I knew the truth. It was a spot inspection. She was auditing my parenting in a public setting. The tension was a low hum beneath the cheerful beep of the checkout scanners and the squeak of cartwheels. For the first 20 minutes, things went smoothly. Leo was happily sitting in the child seat of the cart, pointing at things, babbling about colors. I was letting him hold the list, making him feel like the captain of our shopping expedition. My mom trailed a few feet behind us, her silence more judgmental than any lecture. I could feel her eyes on me, cataloging every interaction, every choice, weighing it against the unwritten statutes of the Maria Lopez parenting doctrine. We turned down the cereal aisle, and that's when the first tremor hit. Leo's eyes, wide and blue, locked onto a box of Choco Dino Crunch. It featured a grinning purple dinosaur juggling chocolate-flavored fossils. To a 2-year-old, it was basically the Mona Lisa. "Dino," he shouted, his little finger pointing with the force of a divine command. "Dino, Daddy, peas." I smiled, ruffling his hair. "Sorry, buddy. We've got our healthy cereal at home. That one's all sugar." His face crumpled. The lower lip, my God, that lower lip. It jutted out with a theatrical wobble that could win awards. Dino. Cereal. "I know you want it, Leo, but we're not getting it today. How about you help me find the oatmeal I tried to redirect a classic tactic from the modern parenting playbook?" My mother materialized at my elbow. "Just get him the cereal." "Jack," she hissed, her voice a low frequency I was sure only I could hear. "It's one box. Don't make a scene." "I'm not making a scene, Mom. I'm just not buying him junk food because he points at it." "You're creating a power struggle you will lose," she countered. "The doctrine is very clear. Choose your battles. A 10-cent box of cereal is not the hill to die on." "It's not about the cereal," I said through gritted teeth, pushing the cart forward. "It's about teaching him he can't have everything he wants the second he sees it." That's when Leo decided to escalate. His plea turned into a whine, then a cry, then a full-throated wail of injustice. He started kicking his legs against the side of the cart, his little body rigid with fury. "I want Dino." Heads were turning. An older woman in a floral dress gave me a look of pity. A young guy with headphones just stared his expression blank. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. This was it, the public test. I took a deep breath, ready to get down on his level to talk him through his big feelings. But I never got the chance. Before I could even kneel, my mother moved. She was a blur of righteous indignation. She bypassed me completely, her face a mask of grim determination. She didn't speak to Leo. She didn't try to soothe him. She reached into the cart and grabbed his arm. It wasn't gentle. It was a hard, swift grip, the kind designed to shock and awe. "Leo Lopez," she said, her voice like cracking ice. It was a tone I hadn't heard in 20 years, but my own body flinched in memory. It was the voice that preceded a verdict. "You will stop this nonsense this instant. You do not behave this way. You are embarrassing your father. You are embarrassing me. We do not act like this. Do you understand me?" Leo's wails turned into terrified, hiccuping sobs. He was no longer a tiny tyrant demanding cereal. He was just a scared little boy who didn't understand why his grandmother, who usually brought him toys, was suddenly so terrifying. He looked at me, his eyes swimming with tears and confusion, his face pleading. "Daddy, help." Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a conscious thought. It was a pure, primal reaction. The 32-year-old man disappeared, and in his place was every version of me from age 5 to 18 who had ever been on the receiving end of that grip, that voice, that public shaming. I put my hand on my mother's wrist. "Let him go," I said. My voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. She turned to me, her eyes flashing. "I am handling this, Jack. This is what you have to do. You cut it off at the source. You show them there is a line that is never, ever crossed." I said I repeated my grip, tightening just enough for her to feel it let him go now. For a second, we were locked in a silent battle of wills, right there in the cereal aisle over a screaming toddler and a box of Choco Dino Crunch. The world seemed to fade away. It was just me and her and the ghost of her doctrine hanging between us. She saw the look in my eyes, a look she hadn't seen since I was 14 and had finally grown taller than her. A look that said, "You don't have power over me anymore." She released his arm. Without another word, I unbuckled Leo from the seat and lifted him into my arms. He buried his face in my neck, his little body trembling. I abandoned the half-full shopping cart right where it was. I didn't care about the groceries. I didn't care about the staring people. My only mission was to get my son out of there, to get him away from her. I walked out of the automatic doors and into the bright, cold air of the parking lot. I carried Leo to the car and stood by the passenger side door, just holding him, rocking him gently, whispering in his ear. "It's okay, buddy. Daddy's got you. You're safe. You just had some really big feelings in there, didn't you? It's okay. We're all done now. We're going home." I wasn't performing. I wasn't trying to prove a point. I was just being a dad. I was doing what felt right, what my heart told me my son needed in that moment. Not a lecture, not a punishment, but comfort. A safe harbor in his emotional storm. Slowly, his sobs subsided, replaced by the occasional shuddering sigh. He kept his face pressed against my shoulder, his small hands clutching the collar of my shirt like a lifeline. The sound of determined footsteps on asphalt announced my mother's arrival. She stopped a few feet away, her handbag clutched in front of her like a shield. Her face was pale, her lips a thin, tight line. "Are you proud of yourself?" she asked, her voice shaking with a fury she was struggling to contain. I didn't turn to look at her. I kept my focus on Leo rubbing his back in slow, steady circles. Right now, all I care about is him. This is exactly what I was talking about, Jack. This. You see what your balance and your feelings get you, a public spectacle. He has no discipline, no respect for authority. He threw a tantrum, and you rewarded him by picking him up and coddling him. Finally, I turned to face her. Leo was still clinging to me, but he was calm now, watching her with wary eyes. He's too Mom. He's not a tiny soldier who needs to be broken. He's a little boy who got overwhelmed in a grocery store. My job isn't to break his spirit, it's to teach him how to handle his emotions. What you did in there wasn't discipline, it was intimidation. It was parenting, she shot back, taking a step closer. It's the same parenting that raised you. Did it hurt you? Are you a broken man? No. You are a successful, responsible adult because I was not afraid to be firm, because I did what was necessary, not what was easy. She was breathing heavily now, the words pouring out of her in a torrent of long-suppressed frustration. This was it, the formal declaration, the moment she stopped advising and started demanding. You are making a mistake, Jack. A terrible mistake. You are too soft on him. You think you are being kind, but you are setting him up for failure. The world is not a kind place. It will not coddle him. It will not care about his big feelings. You need to prepare him. You need to give him the armor that I gave you. She looked me dead in the eye, her expression a mixture of anger, desperation, and what I realized was genuine fear. I am your mother, she said, her voice dropping, taking on a tone of absolute authority, and I am his grandmother. I know what is best. You need to stop this foolishness and listen to me. You need to do it my way. You need to implement the doctrine, not just for screen time, not just for cereal, for everything. It is the only way to ensure he turns out right. It is the only way to keep him safe. She stood there, defiant, waiting for me to concede, waiting for me to finally admit that she had been right all along. She had laid down the law. She was formally, officially trying to pass her heavy, suffocating crown to me. She was trying to make me the new general of her one-man army with my own son as the sole recruit. I looked from her face etched with a lifetime of conviction, down to the top of my son's head nestled under my chin. I felt his small, steady breaths against my chest. He was safe. He was calm. Because of me. Because I had protected him. Not just from a box of cereal, but from her fear, from her past. And in that moment, I knew the days of deflecting were over. The peace could no longer be kept. A line had been drawn not by me, but by her actions in that grocery store. And now, for my son's sake, I had to stand on the other side of it. I took a deep breath, the cold parking lot air filling my lungs, and prepared to say the words that had been sitting in my soul for nearly 20 years. I held my son, my chin resting on his soft hair, and I looked at the woman who raised me. My mother, Maria Lopez, age 56, stood there in the gray light of the parking lot, demanding I inflict the same childhood on my son that I had barely endured. She saw her parenting as a set of tools that forged me into a man. I saw it as a crucible I was lucky to crawl out of. I adjusted Leo in my arms, his weight a comforting anchor. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the space between us with the force of a slammed door. Her face tightened. No. What do you mean, no? Did you not hear me, Jack? This is for his own good. I heard you, I said, my voice steady. I've been hearing you my whole life, and my answer is no. I'm not doing it your way. I took a breath, the words I had swallowed for 2 decades finally rising up. I survived your parenting, Mom. I didn't thrive because of it. I succeeded despite your efforts, not because of them. The blow landed. I saw it in the way her eyes widened, the way a flicker of genuine shock and pain crossed her features before being replaced by a mask of indignation. How dare you, she stammered. Everything I did for you. I was a young mother, only 24 when you were born. I didn't have the luxury of your books and your internet blogs. I had to make sure you were tough, that you were respectful. I did it out of love. Was it love when you made me sit at the dinner table for 3 hours staring at a plate of cold peas until I made myself sick? I asked, my voice still level, but with an edge of cold steel I hadn't used with her before. Was it love when I came home crying because I was bullied and you told me to stop being a baby and go fight them? Was it love when the only 2 emotions allowed in our house were fine and quiet? Each question was a memory, a scar I was laying bare under the fluorescent lights of the parking lot. Leo stirred against my chest, sensing the tension, and I instinctively rocked him, soothing him. That was discipline. She insisted, her voice rising. That was teaching you consequences. That was preparing you for the real world. I was alone. Jack. Your father was working 2 jobs. I had to be both mother and father, both the soft place to land and the firm hand. And I did a good job. Look at you. She gestured at me at my car at my son. You have all of this because I made you strong. You made me resilient, I corrected her. There's a difference. A tree that grows in a constant hurricane might be strong, but it's twisted and scarred. You didn't teach me how to handle my emotions. You taught me how to bury them. You didn't teach me confidence. You taught me how to avoid your anger. Everything I am as a father, the patience, the empathy, the willingness to get down on the floor and just listen to my son, is a direct reaction against the Maria Lopez parenting doctrine. I am not honoring your legacy, Mom. I am actively trying to break a cycle you started. The words hung in the air, brutal and honest. The truth was a weapon I had never wanted to use against her, but she had forced my hand. She had tried to aim that same weapon at my 2-year-old son, and I would not allow it. Tears welled in her eyes, tears of pure, undiluted fury and hurt. I was your mother, she whispered, her voice cracking. I did my best. I know I said, and the anger in me softened just for a moment, but your best hurt me, and I will not let it hurt him. She stared at me for a long moment, her chest heaving. The chasm between us was no longer a crack, it was a canyon. She had come here expecting me to bend, to finally accept her authority. Instead, I had rejected the very foundation of her identity as a mother. Without another word, she turned. She walked to her car, her back ramrod straight, got in and drove away without a backward glance. I stood there in the sudden silence, holding my sleeping son, feeling the profound weight of victory and the deep, aching sorrow of loss. The war was over, but the battlefield felt cold and empty. The days that followed were silent. My mother, who used to call every other day, had vanished from my life. There were no texts, no missed calls, no unannounced visits with a bag of groceries. The silence was a tangible thing, a heavy blanket over our home. At first it was a relief. The low-level tension that always accompanied her presence was gone. But as the days stretched into a week, then 2, the relief curdled into something more complex. One afternoon I was watching Leo play. He had his little wooden blocks and he was trying to build a tower, his brow furrowed in concentration. When it tumbled down, he let out a frustrated little cry. I sat on the floor next to him. That's frustrating, isn't it, buddy? I said. It's okay to be frustrated. Let's try again together. We rebuilt the tower, and when it was done, he beamed with pride. And in that simple, quiet moment, I saw my own childhood in reverse. I thought of my mother not as the 56-year-old matriarch, but as the 24-year-old new mom she was when I was born. I remembered snippets of things I'd overheard as a kid, worries about money, the loneliness she must have felt with my dad working all the time, the fear of raising a son in a world she saw as hostile and unforgiving. Her harsh doctrine, the rules and the rigidity, it wasn't a power trip. It wasn't about control for control's sake. It was armor. A clumsy, ill-fitting, painful suit of armor she had tried to forge for me because she was terrified. She didn't have the tools to teach me emotional intelligence because no one had ever taught her. She preached toughness because she believed weakness led to being crushed. Her parenting wasn't a philosophy, it was a panic response stretched out over 18 years. This realization didn't excuse the pain she caused. The scars were still there, but it reframed the entire conflict. I wasn't fighting my mother's malice. I was fighting her trauma. I wasn't battling a tyrant who wanted to control my son. I was trying to protect him from the misguided love of a grandmother who was still in her own way. That scared 24-year-old girl terrified that her family wouldn't survive unless they were clad in iron. My job wasn't to win a war against her, but to establish a lasting peace. 3 weeks after the fight in the parking lot, my phone rang. Her name flashed on the screen. Mom. I took a breath and answered. Hi, Jack, she said. Her voice was brittle, overly casual. I was just at the store and they had those organic apple puffs Leo likes. I thought I'd drop some by. It was an olive branch, but it was also a test. She was trying to reset things to pretend our confrontation never happened to slide back into her old role through a side door. The old me would have let her just to avoid another fight. But the father in me knew that wasn't an option. "That's thoughtful of you, Mom, but we're all set for snacks," I said, my tone gentle but firm. "But I'm glad you called. We need to talk." There was a pause on her end. "I don't want to fight Jack." "Me neither," I said. "This isn't about fighting. This is about figuring out how we move forward." I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. "Mom, I know that you love Leo more than anything, and I know that everything you do and everything you say comes from a place of wanting to protect him. I see that and I appreciate the intention behind it." I let that sink in, acknowledging her motive, validating her love. This wasn't an attack, it was a negotiation. But I continued, "I am his father. My wife and I, we are his parents. The final say on how he is raised, what he eats, how he is disciplined, that has to be ours. What I need from you is for you to be his grandmother. I need you to be the one who spoils him, who plays with him, who reads him stories and gives him unconditional love. That's the most important job in the world. But I can't have you being his second parent. I have to be the one to steer the ship. Can you accept that?" The silence stretched on, and for a moment I thought she'd hung up. Then I heard a small, shaky sigh. "You really think I was that bad of a mother, don't you?" she asked, her voice small. "I think you were a scared young woman who did the very best she could with the tools you had," I said honestly. "And you succeeded. You got me here. Now you have to trust that you raised a son who is capable of doing the same for his own boy. You have to trust me." There was another long pause. "Okay, Jack," she finally said the words quiet heavy with unspoken things. "Okay, I'll be his grandmother." A month later, my mother was over for dinner. The atmosphere was different, lighter. She was still my mom, but she was watching, listening more than she was directing. At one point, Leo, full of a toddler energy, accidentally knocked his cup of water all over the floor. A year ago, this would have triggered a lecture from my mother about carelessness and making him clean it up himself. I saw the old reflex kick in. Her mouth opened, her brow furrowed, her hands clenched slightly on the table. It was a battle right there in her eyes. The general wanted to issue orders, but then she stopped. She closed her mouth, took a slow breath, and looked at me. It was a look of concession, a transfer of command. I smiled at Leo. "Uh-oh, that's a big spill, little man. It's okay, accidents happen. Let's go get the towels and clean it up together." I went to the kitchen, and when I came back, my mother was on her knees, a napkin in her hand, already dabbing at the edges of the puddle. She looked up at me, not with anger or judgment, but with a small, quiet smile. I handed her a towel, and we cleaned up the mess together. Later that evening after she left, I was putting Leo to bed. He was curled up, sleepy and content. I looked at him so safe and so loved, and I knew I had done it. I had stood the line. I hadn't just survived my mother's doctrine, I had ended it. I had taken the fear and the pain of the past and used it not as a weapon, but as a blueprint for how to build something better. A new legacy, one of patience and understanding, was just beginning. And in my son's peaceful sleep, I saw our victory.